Hi, and welcome to the 2019 course. This is a little introduction video. Alright, quick preview. We're going to talk about kind of introduction to the course as well as introduction to East Asia before World War II. Part 1, introduction to the course. So this course is looking at Japanese military occupation during World War II. We're going to use 3 books to really analyze this topic. We're going to look at Nanjing, the Burning City, by Ethan Young. That's going to be our first book. And this will be looking at the Japanese military occupation of Nanjing, specifically the Nanking City. Our second book, which we'll spend 3 weeks on, is When My Name Was Keiko, which is all about colonialism in Korea. And then the last 2 weeks are going to be on Barefoot Gen, Volume 1. And that's the Japanese military occupation of Japan. So our schedule, before week 1, make sure you introduce yourself on the course website, get familiar with the website, have your books, all that good stuff. You should have been sent an email with introduction survey to the course. Week 1, we do Nanjing. There's going to be a video to go along with that, an optional video talking about some background information as well as some things to look for when you look at the book. We got weeks 2 through 4, When My Name Was Keiko, by Linda Sue Park. 2 weeks for Barefoot Gen. Then the wrap-up, which is a really easy week. And then after that, I submit everything to NCTA. They put together the CEUs and start that process. Alright, so about me, if you're curious about me. A bunch of you have already taken some of my courses before. Some of you, this is your first course with me. So welcome. Alright, so I'm an English and a social studies teacher. I've been with NCTA for about 10 years now. This is my 10th or 11th year. I have a tech background, which is part of the reason why they let me create my own Google site for this rather than going through the NCTA site. And I have a huge love for graphic novels. In fact, Barefoot Gen, which we'll be looking at near the end of this course, is one of my favorite books. Alright, if you're not familiar with graphic novels, don't worry. I've got a little video you can watch. It'll give you kind of some background information. There are a lot of other things out there you can look at. I like Wham, even though it's kind of a drier, I don't want to say boring, but it's more like something you'd read in college. Whereas Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, it's got a lot more humor into it. It's a lot more interesting for people who aren't as into graphic novels. Idiot's Guide to Creating Graphic Novels, also quite interesting if you want to look at a bunch of things and how things are done. Alright, so some things to know. So we have weekly postings that'll be on our website. Please have your posting done before Sunday, and then I respond to every single reply. Email me anytime you have questions or problems. In fact, the most common problem people tend to have is they'll be using their school email account and they can't see the Google chat room, because a lot of schools have that blocked. So if you are unable to see the discussion board, please try logging out of your school account, log into a personal one, or try from your personal computer, because 99% of the time that fixes the problem. Let's see. I will be covering some introductory background material for all the topics, but just a real basic introductory thing, because a lot of this is stuff you probably have already heard of. You just need a little refresher. Those are all optional. The website does stay live more or less, so when this course is over you can still go back to the Google site 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and get any materials you want. I don't tend to update the websites unless I reteach them, but they are a self-contained thing. Alright, and if you aren't familiar with graphic novels, like I said, there is a video you can look at. I've got that on the website. It'll give you a lot of the basics. Alright, part 2. Some background information on East Asia before World War II. So if we go back and we look at ancient history in the Far East there, China has a long history of being the physical and cultural powerhouse in East Asia. There are times where they conquer Korea, there's times where Korea is independent, there's a diffusion of a lot of their culture, a lot of their technology. So really it's kind of like they're the cool kids in East Asia. They have a huge domination even in Japan. For a long time, Japan starts importing everything. A lot of it through Korea, but some of it directly from China. And we're talking religion, art, writing, craftsmanship, activities, technology, you name it, anything and everything. If you look at Japan before it had contact with the rest of Asia, and Japan after, it's widely different, just incredibly different. Then after about 100 years of bringing in all this culture, all this technology, learning everything they can, Japan decides they don't like this uneven relationship. They want to be equal. And one of the big milestones here is a letter that's sent to China that says, from the sovereign of the land of the rising sun to the sovereign of the land of the setting sun, which was a real eloquent way of saying we're equal. The sun might rise in one place and set in the other, but we're still, you're a king, I'm a king. That kind of thing. Alright. Okay, some grammar issues. Anyhow, so Japan starts separating from China and becoming its real own place. So the 1100s, 1600s, Japan enters its medieval period. This is what's most iconic for Japan, what most people think of, with the samurai and the shogun, the daimyos, and all that fun stuff. We get lots of warfare going on in Japan. Eventually things kind of settle down, but you have all of these soldiers sitting around with very little to do. They're being paid, and that's going to lead to the invasion of Korea in a little bit. But a notable event to look at in this time period, and one that will kind of come up in two of the books we're going to read, is the start of this thing called the kamikaze. Now, when the Yuan dynasty, or the Mongolians, they conquered China, and they weren't happy with just China. They were conquering everything. So the Khans get this big invasion force together, Chinese, Mongolians, Koreans, all sorts of soldiers, put them on boats, start heading over to Japan. On their way there, they get to some islands, they have a little bit of success, but it's during hurricane season. Big hurricane comes, destroys most of the fleet, what's remaining turns back, goes back home. A few years later, same thing. Big fleet together, even bigger than the last time, sent over, big hurricane comes, destroys most of the fleet. So the Japanese named this divine wind. They believe this wind protected them, it was sent from the heavens, and they called it kamikaze. Alright, so Japan's becoming its own powerhouse. It's becoming the big dog, as it were. So it kind of starts off with the invasion of Korea. I said we had all these samurai sitting around, very little to do. The infighting has more or less stopped in Japan, at least the blatant infighting. So someone gets this idea of, hey, let's go invade Korea. So it starts in the 1590s. There's going to be a couple of different invasions of Korea, but this will be the first one. And then a little while after that, we get this closed border policy, this isolationism in Japan. Just so happens to coincide with colonialism. Don't think that's a coincidence. Notable events that happened in this time in China, we got the Opium Wars. We're going to have the first Sino-Japanese War. It's going to be, again, Japan invading Korea. And the invasion of Korea was more or less just a way to get into China. One of the big things that happens from that war is that Japan sets itself up as a powerhouse and a dominant force in Asia, more or less kind of knocking China down a peg or two as far as being the big dog. Alright, we've got the Russo-Japanese War, which is an even more important event. It's Russia versus Japan at this time. It's right before World War I. And Japan is really quite dominant in this war. It ends with kind of a world's first time that an Asian country pretty much just dominates and destroys a European country. The U.S. gets involved, comes up with some favorable concessions for Russia. Japan does increase its holdings. It gets some land, which has caused some problems to this day about who the islands belong to and things like that. But moving on. We get World War I, another big event. Japan fights alongside with the Allies, Now, they take a lot of Germany's holdings in the Pacific. One of the most famous ones that they're going to take would be the Marianas Islands. Specifically, Tinian would be the most famous one because that's where the Enola Gay and the atomic bombs took off from. But at this point, Japan takes those from Germany, and it increases its colonial holdings, increases its power as a force in the Pacific, in Asia, and in world affairs. And then we get this colonialism happening just all over, in Asia, in Micronesia, in Indonesia, all over the place. And it's more or less just Japan becoming more powerful. And Japan starts to get this idea of an Asia controlled by Asians. Japan to be in control of Asia instead of having all these different European powers carving up Asia like a turkey. And this is going to be a major influence in a lot of their actions. Alright, so that was just a real basic introduction. If you have any questions, just ask.